Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Big Bros podcast. If it is your first time joining, welcome. My name is Ilan, and I'm joined by my lovely friend and co-host, Mr. Jeremiah Tusia. How are we?
I'm good, mate. How are you?
I'm pretty good. I'm enjoying the sunshine. I'm loving Melbourne summer. What's not to enjoy? What about yourself?
Exactly right, mate. And yeah, look, on a high, we've had a really good run of guests. So yeah, like you mentioned, if it is your first time joining, welcome. And if you haven't quite yet, click that follow button so that you don't miss a beat of what we are posting. We've got really good, exciting guests coming up more throughout the year. So yeah, that's very much our goal this year, Big Bros wise, is to just get the best guests on possible. And it's so far been looking that way. So click the bell, click that follow button so you don't miss a beat, and throw us a follow and chuck us a 5-star rating. It really does help us.
That's very true. I'm glad you said it. But today, we're going to be talking about a topic that I think that a lot of people in our age demographic start to navigate, and it's the whole idea of measuring or balancing your ambition with the idea of work-life balance.
Yeah.
So let's actually go through what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about not only the idea of work-life balance, whether you should pursue it in your 20s or reserve it for later in your 30s, getting comfortable with what actually balance means to you, what your actual relationship is with ambition, before you start navigating or constructing a life. Or constructing a life in the context of, I would say, pandering to those two goals. Because I think ultimately we hear these buzzwords all the time. You go on LinkedIn, you go on Seek, and you look at a job application or you look at a certain job offer, and the way it's advertised is good work-life balance, good balance. And I think that's a very attractive thing to a lot of people. I think the reason it's quite attractive to a lot of people is that most people don't want their work or their professional life to be their entire identity.
It's such a prominent topic and a really timely one as well, because you and I were at a friend's birthday last night together, and I feel like this was a really pivotal conversation that came up in a lot of the discussions that I was having amongst people around me. It was very much like, God, like, we're in our mid-20s now. We're all, very much working full-time now. Most of us are working full-time or studying full-time, and it's very tricky to navigate being able to work full-time, have your relationships, have your friendships, look after yourself gym-wise, fitness-wise. And when you take all of that away, actually having some time for yourself to just be alone, to rest as well. So how can we have all of those buckets, which we will talk about, having different buckets of balance and ambition? How can we actually incorporate all those things together to live a good, fun life in our 20s that still is generating money, and a life in which we can still be ambitious to work towards providing a better life, in our 30s. And, some might think, God, this is really long-term thinking. This is really fast-track thinking. And, you guys are just in your 20s, and why are you already thinking into your 30s and what that will have in store? But I think being in your 20s, you honestly need to start thinking about this to really set yourself up for those years in your 30s, because we all know firsthand, and you guys listening firsthand, the last thing that you would want to do is to reach an age like 30 and then and feel like at that age you still don't know what the fuck you are doing in terms of your work balance, your life balance, your trajectory with work and life. You want to definitely have some form of an idea by the time you're 30. So this is a big notion of Big Bros, and why we talk about these things is because we really want to strap you guys up with the best tools so that you can live a life in your 20s that is, you're very much aware of what you're doing at this age to set yourself up for the future as well, and to really have that trajectory and be confident about it.
All right, well, let's strip it back. Jeremy, for you, why is ambition important in the first place?
Who doesn't want to be ambitious? Who doesn't want to achieve great things? I've always wanted to achieve great things. You've always wanted to achieve great things.
What does that mean, great things to you?
Great things for me means really working towards a high potential, and potential can be a little bit of a buzzword, but really trying to fulfill my potential, because I know that I am capable of achieving a lot of good things in life, and good things meaning generating good money, good wealth, generating really good friendships, generating a really good relationship with my girlfriend, being really, there for my family as well, and having really strong connections and friendships. And that's what I deem as having a really good, fulfilling life, is really basing it around your friendships and connections. Because after all, we are human, and we love human connection, and that's what gives me the most fulfillment in life. But as well as what's really important is being in a position where you can go out quite freely and not have to worry about money to a degree where you're quite frugal and quite stingy. You want to be able to spend with not a laissez-faire mentality, but spend with a mentality that you don't really need to overthink what you are doing when you're spending. You're able to spend because you ultimately want to get that thing or enjoy that experience. And for me, those are the two things that would constitute, just a really good, fulfilling life. Being able to be financially stable, where I don't really need to overthink my expenses, and be able to really have incredible friendships and relationships around me. And that is why it's so important to delve into this now in your 20s, because you ultimately have energy. We have energy right now to do these things, to work harder. We don't have a family to raise just yet.
Can I cut you off really quickly? As you were kind of explaining what you're ambitious about, I couldn't help but think that a lot of the things that you're ambitious about is actually about having a balanced life.
Yeah.
Because you didn't necessarily fixate on one domain. You
That's
didn't talk
right.
about, like, for example, you're a physiotherapist. So some physios, well, I don't really know any other physios other than you and maybe a couple other people, but a lot of people, when you ask them about ambition, they'll gravitate towards one thing, and that's their career, that's their profession, right?
That's right.
I want to be the best lawyer. And in their response, you don't really hear anything about perhaps
their
relationships.
Yeah.
Now, maybe it would go as far to say, well, I want to make so much money as a lawyer that I can take my family on any holiday, I can live in any house I want, and I can provide my kids with everything that they want, with everything that their heart desires. But if you notice in that response, there's a huge material ambition going on. With you though, however, and I think this is kind of something to play around with, a lot of your ambition is tailored towards having a balanced life. Now, the people who listen to Alex Hormozy, the people who are very much into the work at all costs, fuck balance, that's a narrative that I think is more suited to one in their 20s, when they don't have a family, they're not tied down by any major responsibilities, and they can ultimately play to win. Now, what's interesting to me is I was listening to another podcast, as I do, and then they were talking about the idea of, when should you pursue work-life balance in your 20s, or should you do it in your 30s? And the idea that was proposed is that, well, if you focus on purely working in your 20s at the expense of balance, that's not terrible, because say you make a fuckload of money, you're incredibly competent in your professional domain, and you have a bunch of skills and resources that you've accumulated by not pursuing work-life balance in your 20s, you can then actually you actually have the luxury then to take your foot off the gas pedal and integrate a little bit more balance. Because it's like, if your wife's saying, oh, I wish you didn't work so late. Like, you've worked so hard throughout your 20s. We've got all this money. You don't need to keep working. Like, you can integrate a little bit more balance. It's much better to have that than the other way, where it's like you're too laissez-faire in your 20s. You don't work hard enough, and you perhaps get to the point in your 30s where you do need to sacrifice a bit of balance because you have more responsibilities. Now, what's interesting with you here is that, and I think this is where I think the conversation gets lost a bit, because on the internet, you'll hear that a lot of people have what I would say is ambitions towards a unitary goal, which it tends to be material and material achievement in the realm of their professional life. I think for most people though, and I can say this for myself as well, I think I'm similar to you. I'm ambitious towards having a bunch of things that will fill my cup. So that includes not just my professional domain, but the relationships around me and the memories and the experiences and the travel. And I think a lot of that's I think there's a way you can integrate those two things that doesn't mean that you have to follow the Alex Hormozy grind until you die mindset.
Absolutely. You mentioned there being able to, in your work it up 20s, which is something that he has commonly coined, being able to work it up in your 20s, to just devote yourself to working, to then take the foot off the gas when you get later into your late 20s, into your 30s. Now, the problem I have with that is that, yes, whilst that is true, and that can be true for a lot of people, you can definitely work it up in your 20s. But like you said, you relinquish the ability to then have those experiences in your 20s, because you ultimately can't do both. If you are that work it up individual in your 20s, where maybe you're working a finance job and you need to go into work between like 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. every day in the city, but then you get home and then you need to continue working on to midnight. Well, where the fuck is your balance there? Where the fuck is your ability to just actually be with your mates, be with your partner, be there for yourself, and just go to the gym? I know people that have worked these jobs, these really rewarding jobs in terms of monetary benefit, typically in finance, which is all good and well if that's what you want to do. But these people, our age, they have now definitely taken the foot off the gas, because they've actually relinquished those last few years of their life where they have almost given themselves away. They've lost a heavy amount of weight because they weren't able to keep up their gym routine and go to the gym. So they're not feeling as physically fit. They don't really have those core friendships that they once did because they've never been there for their friends. And because of all that stress and anxiety from working all the time, doing 70 to 80 hour work weeks, they've ultimately tarnished maybe their relationship with their partner as well, because all they've done is work. They've been married to work, been married to the job. And whilst that is okay for some people, this narrative that I've painted is definitely the case for a lot of people out there. It's not to be scary, but that definitely is the case for a lot of people out there. And that is not the case that I would ever want to have for myself.
No, but look, it shouldn't take therapy to illuminate this idea. However, something I have realized in the last few years is that maybe some people in our friendship group sometimes believe that the way we think is the way others people think. What I mean by that idea is, like, as you're describing here, that you couldn't do that sort of lifestyle. To you, it sounds crazy. Something that I keep learning as I guess I get through my 20s, that people just have different priorities and values. And is that an obvious point? Yeah, it is. To a certain extent, it is. But so many people prioritize and value different things. So for that investment banker, they may have not come from money, and all they wanted to have in their childhood is material wealth.
Sure.
So maybe the goal they made to themselves is, you know what, even if I do sacrifice 2-3 years of my life in my early 20s to be in the corporate world, I'll do it. I'll do it because I don't want to feel the pain that I did when I was in my younger years, and there was financial insecurity, and I was worried about when my next meal was going to happen, or the fact that I couldn't afford a clean pair of shoes, and mum and dad were working 2 jobs. And perhaps for that child, they've married themselves to accruing financial material wealth. Luckily, you and I were in a very different but more privileged position. So obviously our life and our past is going to shape our priorities and what we value.
Absolutely.
And I think, and this is what I really do believe, this is like where, you know, a lot of people might listen to this podcast episode specifically and be like, fuck, these 2 privileged white males talking about work-life balance. And there's a part of it where I agree, because talking about work-life balance is a very big luxury to have. You go to the second and third world, work-life balance isn't really a topic of conversation. You work to live, ultimately. You have no other choice. But if you grow up in an affluent society and you've got a job that, you know, you have a good education, you've got a good friendship network, and you're not fighting every day to survive, then your entire mindset is going to be shifted towards, well, okay, how can I make this even better? So I think, and look, again, everyone's different. Everyone's going to have different experiences. One thing I did want to talk to you about is some people, and this is what I do realize a lot, some people, because ambition is so glorified, and I think ambition's a healthy thing, gives us a reason to get up in the mornings, but I sometimes think that people weaponize ambition to cover up for their own insecurities. What do I mean by that is, I know people who are constantly busy, not with things that are necessarily useful, but because they can't just sit doing nothing.
I think that's such an incredible point that I've never thought about. Yeah, almost being married to the game of work or the game of their career because they're covering up those things that maybe they have insecurities about that they're not delving into. So maybe they are a really unhealthy person. Let's just say a really unhealthy person. They've really struggled with looking after themselves from a weight perspective, from a diet perspective, but their excuse is, but I'm just always working. I don't have time to look after my health. I don't have time to go to the gym. I don't have time to eat healthy because I'm just always working. So you're absolutely right. But this is where any extreme is bad in my opinion. Any extreme is going to lead to offsetting other things in life that is generally going to be quite detrimental. So this is why this episode is really centered around how you can be that ambitious person whilst having balance. And an idea that we spoke about on our episode with Casper Tremlett, shout out Trem, is having seasons in your year so that you can be that ambitious person to really work towards your goals, make that money, get that bread that you want to make, that you want to create for yourself, but still also have those times where maybe you can have a holiday, maybe you can see your friends on the weekends, you can spend time with your partner and go on really nice dates, and you can just have that balance as well. So what are those seasons and how do you incorporate those seasons? And we spoke about that idea of maybe typically in the summertime period, that December, January period where it's Christmas time, it's summertime, actually allowing yourself to take a little bit of a back step, not necessarily needing to have the foot on the gas for work like you have been doing throughout the year, and actually saying to yourself, all right, I am recognizing that this is a time frame in my life. This is a time point in my year that I can actually relax off of work and delve deeper into those other things that are important in my life, like friendship, like going for your morning walks and your coffees, like going for your swims at the beach at 4 o'clock on a Sunday when you would typically be doing maybe some admin tasks during that time. Actually allowing yourself to have that season at certain points of the year to then allow yourself to be almost reinvigorated as well when you need to go again and work harder, because you're never going to always keep up that same consistency of work and dedication for 12 months of the year, for 52 weeks of the year. And the people that can are fucking superhuman, like the Hormozis. They are that 0.1%, and that's not necessarily a good thing. We love a lot of what Hormozi preaches and what a lot of these people preach, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they are right, nor does that mean that we are right. So that is why you can't take what they say for gospel all the time.
Well, most people aren't in the 99th percentile of productivity. And what I mean by that is most people can't work to the same extent that someone like Hormozi does. But, whilst we're on the topic of seasons, I totally agree. I think that balance and ambition can definitely coexist, but just not on the same continuum. They can coexist assuming there's different seasons. So we're talking about seasons before, but tell me, what season are you in now?
Season I'm in now is probably work. Yeah, I am in that season of working. When we took a couple episodes off of the podcast over that Christmas New Year period, that was definitely a rest period. From a work perspective, I was still working, but I wasn't working as hard. Life wasn't as busy from a work perspective. It wasn't as busy from a podcast perspective for us as well. And we recognize that. We pencil that into our calendar and we're like, okay, this is an off season for us. This is a period of work. We've come back, we're reinvigorated again. So this is definitely a go period for me. I've got that energy to do it. And picking up on your habits from previous years is going to be really helpful here to recognize, okay, when you should maybe pencil in a little bit of an off period again later in the year, because it's very easy to work around your summer periods. But thinking about, okay, once June, July come around, because that's typically when it's more wintry seasons for us, typically more likely to get sick at that stage as well, where you've maybe pushed for 6 months at that from the start of the year until then, and you start to almost get a little bit of that drive to, maybe take a back seat again, and otherwise you have that tendency to burn out. So penciling those time periods along the course of the year based on your habits from previous years is going to be really helpful. But I know for myself right now, this is definitely a season that I'm in now to work hard, really push. And that's because I have given myself the chance to take that back seat and to really relax a little bit over that summer period. And now I can go again.
It's interesting because I think that's not the conversation that you tend to hear in the productivity space, is it?
No, it's not.
You don't hear the topic of, well, allow yourself to have a bit of rest at some point. It It's Chris Williamson says type A people tend to have a type B problem.
Yeah.
It's not attractive to tell someone, yeah, just go chill out on the couch and just relax a little bit more. It's
Yeah.
way more sexy to be like, go and do a Rocky style montage and work out, get up at 6 a.m. and
It's not easy,
work out.
but I know we're better for it, and I know I'm better for
Well,
it.
think about it this way: why do we sleep?
That's
You
right.
know, it's like people. It's like, yeah, you're technically from a physical aspect doesn't seem like you're achieving your work goals, but really all you're doing is just supplementing your health. You know, we all need sleep. It's a vital and critical function of being human. And we understand that, you know, sleep is one of the biggest levers that will support not just our productivity, but our general health, right?
Yeah.
It's funny. The seasons conversation's interesting because I'm in that point now where I'm like, okay, I finished my studies a couple months ago. I'm starting full-time work in mid-March, and I'm like, you know what? I really want to travel. So I'll be, you know, I'm not sure. This episode will probably be released in the last couple of weeks while I'm away, but I'm off to South Korea and Japan for about 6 weeks. And the exciting part about that is it's a very deliberate part of my 2026 season to start off with some sort of holiday before I get into full-time work.
There you go.
And I think that for me, I haven't had that maybe rest and like the last 2 years, I probably haven't had like a proper rest and recover period. It's been very much like the equivalent is like, you know, you take a week off and then you're right back on it. So I've gotten really used to having things to do almost always. And whilst that's not a bad thing, I think it's actually quite a good thing. It can mask over just the ability to do almost like a self-audit, like a personal audit, because as I said before, when you're busy, you really can get into the habit of neglecting the thoughts or the things that you need to address in your life. Now, are there major things I think I need to address in my life? Personally, not really. Like perhaps there might be that I'm just not conscious of. Perhaps you can make that argument for everyone. But, you know, generally speaking, I think having a bit of R&R time or where I'm kind of going to be in a different environment can only really be helpful. And I think... And maybe, you know, someone who I feel like you're pretty seasoned at that routine of knowing when to rest, knowing when to work. I feel like it's something that's worked for you as well.
Yeah.
Like, you know that you come back feeling rested and rejuvenated. And I think for me, I'm kind of just running a little bit on fumes.
Fair enough.
And I think it'll be interesting to see how I react. Like, am I going to be the sort of person that 3 weeks in is like, no, I actually need to get back into work? Or am I going to be the sort of person that's like, you know what? I don't mind this resting and relaxation thing, but I think ultimately seasons are going to come into it. I'm going to come back and I think I'm going to be very, very hungry.
You know what's really helpful though with this whole topic is having that North Star. Having that North Star meaning having that career aspiration, working in that job, having that goal that is your North Star, that thing that you want to keep working at and you want to keep achieving. For me, that is my job as a physio. I really love my job as a physiotherapist, and I know that when I'm working in it, it fulfills me, and I know that I can devote myself to it and I can work hard and I can generate me good money. That is my North Star from a career perspective. And I know that when I do have a break, when I have that time off, when I have that R&R, that rest and recovery period, when I go on that holiday, for me, I've always said, I know that having a holiday, I only really enjoy those, you know, maybe 3-4 week holidays at most. As soon as I'm on a holiday for about 5 weeks, I feel like I've taken too much time off and I almost want to get back to work because I feel like, yes, you've had your holiday, you've had your fun, you've had your enjoyment. Get back now and actually work again, you know, because I want to get back to that North Star. I want to feel like I'm working towards that ambition. That's the whole purpose of this episode, how to be a balanced person and a quite ambitious person at the same time. So I know I've got that ambition from a career perspective, and having that holiday period allows me to then return to that North Star with that same mindset, that same level of energy. But then on the contrary, you see people that constantly take gap years, that constantly take 6-month hiatuses, keep going on travelings and keep going on holidays, but they don't have that North Star. And that's where procrastination comes into the picture there for someone like that, and where that person, they're maybe having that too much of that balanced approach, that too much of that laissez-faire approach.
You think they're avoiding being home. There's something that they're avoiding at home because by them being home, they'll have to almost come to terms with an inadequate reality, perhaps. Is that what you're saying?
That's right. Well, it's like what you said about almost covering up for something on the contrary. So what you spoke about before there, what we spoke about was working too hard to cover up that other side, cover up maybe that personal side, those insecurities that need to be developed. What I'm saying is probably the contrary for that, doing the opposite, being way too relaxed, way too calm, way too holiday-y, because you're covering up, maybe not having that North Star and not having that ambitious approach. So for me, I think one of the best pieces of advice is just, really trying to find that North Star. If you are in your 20s, really try find that thing now that makes you feel passionate from a work perspective, makes you feel like you want to get up in the morning and go to work and make money and generate some wealth.
But you don't feel like that every day, though. I don't think.
No. But that's the thing. It's a North Star. It's an overall thing that is overarching, because it's not going to be every day, and that's where your holidays are important.
But I think everyone's got different reasons to travel. There's a difference between travel and a holiday. I'm a big believer of that. And look, for one person who might be like Desi Freeman on Interpol, trying to travel and avoid something at home, like being taken into custody, it's very different from the 27-year-old who finished their 3-year uni degree and they might be feeling lost. And part of them's thinking, you know what? I'd rather have my life set up in my 30s. I'd rather just spend my 20s winging it and traveling. And I actually think you could make the argument, are they avoiding something that's important at home? They're probably avoiding something that's important to us, but we don't know what's important to them, right? Yeah. And I think that's something I've really started to entertain the idea of in my head, is like, just because I've got specific standards that I find important, it's like I said earlier in the episode, it's not going to be important to everyone.
Sure.
And something I'm really trying to be conscious of is not judging those people. Now, sometimes it's obvious. Like, there's no denying we've got friends or people that we've spoken to in the past that a lot of the time say they know what they need to be doing at home, and then they travel for a really long period of time, and they whinge about the fact that they're maybe 2 steps backwards, and they knew that they were going to be 2 steps backwards. And I think that a lot of people, we lack clarity with the things we need to do at home. And I think that's the problem with ambition. Sometimes we're so ambitious, we don't get clear in what we actually want, because it's hard. Like when you just sit in silence and you have a thought that comes out and it comes into your conscious awareness, and you have to kind of just ruminate and fixate on it. Do you think that's a comfortable experience?
No.
It's not. So what are you going to do? You're going to try and avoid it, because having too much of it can become overwhelming. And for that person, the avoidance behavior might very well be getting on Expedia and booking the next flight out of here. And I think if there is any sum up to this episode, is in your 20s, being ambitious is great, but first define your relationship with ambition. What are you ambitious towards? I think for most people, they're going to be similar to us in that they'll be ambitious towards creating a life that has maybe several buckets that gives them that balance. It's not just fixated on work. It's fixated on various domains. But after you've kind of gotten clear on that, I think the next step is then having that North Star, as you said, and then working and maybe structuring your life around that North Star and your relationship with ambition. Because, ambition is fantastic.
Yeah.
But don't use it to paper over cracks.
It's like that analogy of having a jar. If you have a jar and you fill the jar up with rocks first as your key pillars of what are the key things that are important to you. So for this example, for me, that could be, all right, I'm going to fill up that jar with a rock that is firstly going to be my career, my work. Then it's going to be my friends, and it's going to be, my girlfriend as well. So those are the 3 key things that are important to me. Number 4, if we can fit another rock in there, it's going to be my health and fitness too. Okay. And then you can fill it up with the sand afterwards. The sand can fall through the cracks after. So that can be those other little things that can then fulfill that jar and fill up that jar first. If you just fill up that jar with all the sand first, then you've got no room for the rocks, those key pillars. So those things that are your North Star, those things that do make you work towards a common goal. So think about what those rocks are for you when you are filling up that jar. What are those things that get you out of bed in the morning, that make you feel ambitious, so that you can then fill up the rest of your jar with sand, with your balance.
On that note, guys, if you've enjoyed this episode, please do rate us 5 stars on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. It does help us more than you know. We hope you guys have a lovely rest of your week. Ciao.
Bye.